Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's Swampside Chat. My name is Chris Wild, and I'm the current webmaster of the Tampa Gator Club and a 2007 graduate of the University of Florida. On today's Swampside Chat, we're going to be speaking with two of the owners of BarrieHaus Beer Co, Jim and Brittney Barrie. This is only the second chat in our series where we interview Gator alumni who impact the community and learn a little bit more about their stories. So if you're a Gator football fan, you might know that Jim Barrie was recruited by Urban Meyer to play for the Gators and might have a few championship rings from his time there in Gainesville. But what you might not know is more of his path that he's taken since his football career, which has somehow led him to become the head brewmaster here at BarrieHaus. And then also joining us, Brittney Barrie, or should I say Dr. B? Do you go by?
I go by Dr. B, yes.
Okay, I'll respect that. So Dr. B received her doctorate of physical therapy from UF in 2013. She still works in this field while also maintaining a key role in running the operations of BarrieHaus. So we're going to be excited to talk to both of them about that. But before we chat about running a microbrewery here in Tampa, I wanted to go back to your UF days. So starting at the beginning, Jim, why don't you tell us a little bit about what it was like being recruited by Coach Urban Meyer?
Oh man, it was a wild process. You know, I had offers from all across the country. I grew up a major Gator fan though, and to get an offer from Florida it meant the world to me. It ended up being an intense process actually, because there's just so many people courting you. It's really an intense process, and but at the end of the day, I'm got Gator blood inside me, so it was an easy decision.
Okay, so I have to ask a personal question then. So obviously you were very career-minded with football at the time, but you're telling me you've got a family full of Gators. That's where your passions lie. Did you have to consider the decision of a choice of attending the University of Florida or pursuing football elsewhere? Was that a decision you had to make?
Yeah, the great thing about UF is that it was really the best combination of academics and athletics in the country. I mean, I would say Michigan is probably the only comparable school at that time. Michigan's kind of fallen off, but 2005, they were one of the top 5 programs in the country. So having a school right there in our backyard, it ended up being a no-brainer.
Mm-hmm. Well, you made a great choice accepting that offer and enjoying the Gators. Now, that was a unique time for Gator sports. I mean, it wasn't just football. I mean, basketball, everything going on. I could probably name 12 different championship teams from that era. But what can you kind of give us a little bit more insight what it was like playing with that team? I mean, it doesn't sound like it's your average team, is it? Some hard work.
No, I mean it was really hard, and I'm confident we worked the hardest in the country out of everyone, and we also probably had the most talent in the country as well assembled during that time from 2006 to 2009. So that combination, we were pretty much unbeatable. We never went into a game ever thinking we were going to lose. I can promise you that. And we didn't lose very often.
That's for sure. That's for sure. You guys made it great for all of us Gator fans to watch along. So now, the sad thing is you did experience a career-ending injury in your time there. And looking back on that time, I vaguely remember there being quite a notable injuries, and it appears that right around your time there was a number of them. Do you attribute that to the hard work that your team does to prep, or was it just a coincidence?
That's a great question. I think it probably was a coincidence. I think there was like 7 or 8 guys with, if I remember correctly, with ACL injuries. And some of them were no contact injuries. Mine was a major contact injury, but it's probably a combo of both, really. Bad luck and being training to the max. I could probably say it's a combo of both.
Yeah. obviously when you have something like that happen, it's not immediately known. Can you kind of describe a little bit the process of making the realization that likely your career was ending at that point? What was
that? That was really tough. It was at the fall camp of 2008, the national championship year, when it happened, and then I rehabbed to try to come back in 2009. Rehabbed, and then tried to come. I wasn't ready for spring football. In 2009, that 2009 spring, and started improving, but it wasn't really. I was pretty much 50% of what I was athlete wise, and when I went into fall camp, it was obvious I could barely walk at the end of practices, and it just wasn't going to happen, unfortunately. And I would like to say that the coaching staff was nothing but supportive. They never tried to kick me off the team or anything like that. It was a mutual decision that we slowly came upon with everyone. And I really respect the Florida coaching staff at the time for giving me that. And I know that's not necessarily a very common thing in powerhouse football programs.
Yeah. Kind of has that Gator culture that you're speaking on attached to it. Yeah.
Yep.
So about this time, I'm guessing, and maybe Britney can jump in and describe how she came into your world. But so about this time is when you met Britney on campus at UF. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was attending UF, and I was working for the swimming and diving team at the time. So I was involved in the athletic side of things, and Jim and I both were taking statistics at the time, and I saw this cute hunk, sitting way farther up in class with the softball players, and I was way in the back with the swimmers and the gymnasts, and I was like, what the heck? No, it was we met, we started studying together, and honestly, that was back in 2008. So we were able to experience a lot of really fun Gator championships together, and tailgating is a part of our life. And then I stayed on at UF. I graduated in 2010, then became a double Gator, graduating from physical therapy school, and Jim stayed on and graduated from law school at UF as well. So we definitely miss Gainesville. So we had, I think we lived there for 13 years.
Yeah, great city. I was there just last weekend, and it always brings me back. I enjoy being there. So somehow this story is going to go from some UF double major or double graduates from UF all the way to microbrewery owners. I kind of want to draw out this path a little bit further. So, you mentioned something in there that, you were working on your doctorate, but Jim also became a practicing lawyer. So Jim, how do you go from, a football career at UF to, practicing law? How did that transition play out?
Yeah, after my injury, I decided that practicing law was something I wanted to do. And so I just pursued that. I also started homebrewing, actually, about that time, and had a little bit more time on my hands. And
a little bit more time on your hands, like
I couldn't believe how much more time I had on my hands, actually. And so pursued practicing law, and just the big kicker is I fell much more in love with brewing than I did with law. But homebrewing was more of a hobby for me. Always had in the back of my mind that I'd open a brewery one day, pie in the sky, and continue to brew, be very passionate about brewing. I'd say that the passion I had for football went into that, honestly. And continue to brew in law school, practice law, and continue brewing while doing that. But I just had that bug I couldn't shake, and so decided to leave practicing law to open a brewery eventually. But I really decided that I needed to work in a commercial brewery, learn the commercial side of everything, from the business side to the brewing side. so I had good friends at First Magnitude Brewing Gainesville who knew what I wanted to do, and they let me come aboard. And I worked there for about 3 years while Britney and I looked for a location, and finally found one in Tampa. It took a long time, but we found that location and went through all the build out and all that. And that's a very long story that I don't know how much you want me to get into.
Well, before we get that far ahead, I wanted to go back one step and say, so, my understanding is you have quite the history of beer making in your family line. So, maybe it was destiny for you. Can you kind of touch on going back to the roots and your family's beer history?
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. I mean, I have 3 generations of brewing in my family. My great grandfather, he immigrated from Germany, Philip Kling. He was a barrel maker. And we're talking like the 1840s. There was a large wave of German immigrants who came to the U.S. at that time. And he opened a brewery called Peninsular with some partners in 1863, which he eventually became a full owner, and it became PH Clean Brewery. And that was a large brewery in Detroit, and they distributed all across Michigan. And the only reason they were shut down was Prohibition. And his son-in-law, which was my great-great-grandfather, opened another brewery in Detroit. And they had, and this was in 1897, Tivoli Brewing. And they're very interesting because they made what was known as the Altus Lager. And that beer they were mega mass producing Altus Lager before Prohibition. I think they were one of the 4th largest brewery in the state, if I remember correctly. And that actually survived Prohibition. They changed their name. After Prohibition, they were making sodas and illegally running beers through the mob. And that's some cool stories that I know from my mom's side of the family, where they were pretending to sell near beer, but really it was full strength beer, and running them to the bars across the country, across the city, excuse me. And but they eventually got bought out in the 50s, but they were able to survive Prohibition, and that brand lasted until the early 90s. Pretty incredible. One of the few. I believe there was only 100 breweries that survived Prohibition, and there were 1,000 or so at the time. So pretty incredible.
Wow, that's actually a pretty cool story.
Yeah.
And something you mentioned there that I hadn't heard before. You mentioned that they, I guess, near beer. Is that something that was legal at the time?
Correct. Yeah. If it was, I think it was like under 1% alcohol or 0.5% alcohol, it was okay. But they were
what we call non-alcoholic.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. They were actually just making full strength beer and shipping it off.
Okay. So was there more any knowledge passed down through your family, or besides stories, or do you have some secret brewing tips and a family Bible hidden in an attic somewhere, or?
Go ahead, Brittany. What were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say we wish we were able to. Through Facebook and finding some people, we were able to find descendants of that side of Jim's family, and we were able to chat with some of them and have their contacts. And we got some great pictures and some great historical photos that we have in the brewery. But a lot of those documents and the recipes were lost in a basement fire, basically, up in Detroit years ago. So
by a drunken uncle.
Well, that was, yeah. So the story goes.
Okay. So
Can't
now
make that up.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about that after this chat. Yeah. So Britney, now, Jim's got a family history. How did you become a beer lover? And my understanding is you are both beer judges. So I would like to talk about that more next, but give us a little bit of background of how you got pulled into the beer world.
Jim just suckered me into it. No, it's something that we developed over time. So we started dating, and he had this time on his hands, and he started home brewing. It's the classic college idea of we can brew beer cheaper than we can buy beer, right? So genius. So No, so of course, then you buy all of the things and all of the hobbies, and it becomes bigger and bigger. I think Jim honestly put his like competitive drive from football straight into brewing and started entering into all these competitions and wanting to win and all these things. So it was a fun time. And so we were part of the Hogtown Brewers, which is a homebrew club in Gainesville that's extremely active. And they do a lot of fun things together and also send out their beer to competitions. So we became very involved with them, and they do classes and things like that. So we took some beer judge classes and learned how, kind of like wine, like you sit and you look at what's a Sauvignon Blanc, what makes it those things. It's different in New Zealand than it is in California. So same thing with yeast. Hops are grown throughout the world. Grain is grown throughout the world. And so all of those elements, depending on how you combine those elements and how you brew it, can change the flavor and the quality of the beer. So you kind of get this, you do the same kind of training just for different styles of beer.
Okay. So when you guys are developing beers at BarrieHaus, I'm jumping a little ahead, but it ties into what you're saying. What separates a home brewer from a commercial brewer? Is it just the technique? Is it the ingredients? Or is it just scale? I mean, clearly people like your beers more than they would like something I would make, but is there more to it? Or
Yeah, there's a lot more to it. Honestly, you're dealing with commercial equipment. It doesn't scale exactly like from a 5-gallon batch to a 600-gallon batch. It doesn't really work out the same. There's different things going on. You're dealing, and I'm in a manufacturing warehouse, so there's more dangerous chemicals. There's 180-degree water all the time. The yeast care is much different. I'm looking under a microscope and testing the beers and making sure that there's no contamination. So it's a little bit more of a thorough process.
Okay. So going back to where we left off in the story of your journey, you were working for First Magnitude to gain your brewing skills, and you mentioned they knew you were interested in opening your own brewery, so
Yep.
They didn't have any concerns with that, or that you were going to be competition down the road.
Not only did they know we were going to open a brewery, but we were planning on opening in Gainesville.
Oh.
And that was our original plan, and it really just didn't work out for us, which is honestly for the best looking back on it. But so they were 100% supportive, and I recommend everyone go drink their beer because they make fantastic beer and are great people.
I agree. I enjoyed some this week. I'll keep saying that because it was so great. The 72 Ale, I recommend it. All right. So,
Yeah.
Before I wanted to get into more about building your business. As you were wrapping up, learning your skills at First Magnitude, obviously you had that passion, you had that dream. You always thought you were going to open a brewery. But looking at my own career, it's quite the jump to go into something like this and make that investment. Describe how you knew like you were ready, or what the steps you took to get yourself ready. It seems like quite the undertaking from going from someone else's shop to your own.
Yeah, I think having the knowledge base from First Magnitude was honestly a big part of it, and then you just can't be afraid to ask questions and ask around and go to the craft brewers conference and they have a big showcase. So you learn more about equipment and more about the science aspect of the brewing process. It's a never ending process, which makes it so interesting. There's you can learn something new every day. And then on the business side, the same thing. Britney's much better at that than I am. So I'm just the dumb jock brewer, and she's the smart person running the show. So
Okay. And you also have a third owner you brought in, June Bailey, I believe you said his name. And
Yep.
You brought him in for like the sales aspect. Was that a difficult decision to bring in someone not from the family directly, or was that?
June is my best friend since 6th grade. It was a very easy decision, and he's a natural talent. He actually runs our marketing too right now, which I'm sure he's thrilled about. But he's a very fantastic third wheel for all of us.
All right, well then, go ahead.
I was gonna say he's an Auburn grad, so we still accept him. He wears orange and blue too, so he fits in just fine.
Okay, good. So I'm going to follow up, and either of you can answer this question, but this is a test on behalf of June Bailey then, because I'm going to ask you, what sets apart your brewery from all the others that have emerged across the Tampa Bay region in the past decade?
We are the only ones dumb enough to focus on lagers specifically.
Okay. Well, I think that deserves a conversation. It doesn't take much of poking around your website to see the love for lagers. So why don't one of you start with what's the primary difference between an ale and a lager? Because that seems to be the big dichotomy, right?
It is. I'll give you a non-scientific description, and then Jim can give you more of the scientific description of kind of what the two differences are. But lagers generally, back in the 1800s is when we were all English ale drinkers, and then the German immigrants started coming over and they brought their yeast with them. So now when you think of lagers, people think of macro, Bud Light, Coors Light, easy drinking. Everybody can get behind it. And so on a different scale, we're producing lagers that have a lot more variety of styles. So we have everything from American ale or American lagers to like German style Pilsners. Tampa Export is our flagship, and it's a Dortmunder style beer. But we also brew things that are darker in color and more complex in flavor, but still super easy drinking. So it's like what a Yingling looks like is our Vienna lager, or our Dunkel, which is a fan favorite, is darker in color, maltier, complex like taste, but it's 4%. So people can get a flight of beers that look totally different from each other. They're all lagers and they all have different flavor profiles. And so we just get really excited about educating people on what that is. And when I say dumb enough to brew it is because they take so much longer and they take a lot more care than an ale usually does. So for fermentation, it takes about 6 weeks for these beers to be ready in the tanks, whereas an ale might take 10 days, 2 weeks. You can't really hide any off flavors or anything in with a lot of hops or a lot of additives. So our beers are very clean. They don't have hardly anything except for hops, yeast, malt, water. We don't add, peanut butter and lactose to a lot of our beers.
So I'm loosely familiar with I forget the name, but back in Germany in the Bavarian region, they have maybe you should just jump in and tell me, but it's the key ingredient.
You can say it. You can do it.
It's on the tip of my tongue, but basically, do you follow a similar premise of the kind of what you're describing? Like you don't throw a bunch of fun sugars and whatever into your beer. You're sticking to the key ingredients. Is that?
Yeah, Jim, do you want to explain that?
It's the Reinheitsgebot, where you're only allowed to use malt, barley, water, and yeast. But we do generally not 100%. It is pretty restrictive, honestly. We add a Whirlfloc to the kettle, which helps coagulate the proteins in the sediment in the whirlpool, so you're pulling less sediment into the fermenter. We add finings, which help the filtration process. So we're not strict on that, but it really doesn't affect the flavor of the beer, and everything's natural that's used.
And Jim, you can talk about like your rice lager and Colonel Mays coming out like Cinco de Mayo, how you're going to use different ingredients there as well.
Correct. So under Reinheitsgebot, you technically couldn't use adjuncts, which include like rice and corn, and that's like what was it? I think it was like Miller Lite. Budweiser was attacking Miller Lite for using corn syrup, but even though they both use it, but corn can actually be a nice flavor in a beer because it really helps. It adds a little touch of malt character and helps it dry it out. And if we followed Reinheitsgebot strictly, we'd be unable to do so. So it's not. I think it's too strict personally, and It just doesn't interest me to follow it that much because it limits our brewing capabilities.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, talking earlier when you stepped away, Britney was talking about how the lagers take more time and more effort. One follow-up I wanted to jump in on that as well was, is there a risk of bad batches? I mean, if you've got your routine down, you might feel pretty confident, but do things go wrong? And is that a significant, is there a probability that you're fighting against that things could go wrong somewhere in the process?
Yeah, that's always a risk for any brewer, honestly, ale or lager. And that's why you have to have really strict sanitation on cleaning, sanitation. A lot of brewers joke they're 90% janitors, which is kind of true in a way because you're cleaning a lot, but you have to make sure you get the end product you want. And it's just part of the whole brewing process. Everything needs to be really clean and sanitized to have success on a consistent basis. But even with that, eventually you probably will have a batch that's not very good and just it has to go down the drain. It's kind of part of the deal. It just happens.
So you're not one of those breweries that sticks a different name on it and calls it a special.
No. We try really hard not to serve bad beer. It'll go down the drain first because our reputation's at stake, and it's just not worth it.
Yeah. So Jim, I'm really interested in the brewing process. I hope some of our audience is as well. And we can see that you're in the actual brew room right now. Do you want to give us like a real high level overview of how the brewing process works for those who haven't experienced that? Maybe not into all the technical details, but kind of on the high order.
Sure, I'll keep it really basic. You basically you start by mashing grains, malted barley, with hot water. And you do this at like a 150 degree temperature. And I'm going to make it really, really basic and quick so we don't lose everyone that's looking at this. And then you transfer, I'm just going to make it really basic. Transfer into the kettle where you boil what you extract what's called wort, which is essentially sugar water from the grains. The heat and the enzymes break down the mash into a variety of sugars, and you transfer that into a kettle when you bring that to a boil. And this is where you add hops for flavor and bitterness. And then that's normally a 90-minute process for us, the boil. And then you cut the boil off, you whirlpool it to get all the sediment and what's called trub into the center of the kettle, and you draw off clean filtered wort into your fermenter, and what's called knocking out. You knock out for lagers at 50 degrees. That's the temperature around they ferment that into the fermenter. And then you add your yeast, which I think in our case, lager yeast. And that process takes about 2 weeks, the fermentation time. And when the fermentation time's finished, you crash, which the temperature to around freezing. And it takes an additional month or so or longer for the beer to be ready at that point. That's a really, really elementary overview of brewing.
No, that's really good. And actually, I've heard this from other breweries and stuff, but I heard something there I hadn't heard before. You said you called it crash, where you bring down the
crash, cold crashing. Yeah. Yep. Okay. Cold crashing. Yep.
So that process seems pretty consistent from beer maker to beer maker. What can you really do to innovate in that process? Is there much you can mess with? Is it just buying different equipment, but the process doesn't change, does it?
Process doesn't change. We kind of use some old school techniques. Like not many craft brewers naturally carbonate, so we have what's called a spunding valve that we attach the tank and the during fermentation, CO2 is produced by the yeast, and on the tail end of fermentation, we capture it in the tank, so it actually carbonates the beer itself. So you get a little different character using that. I mean, we're making old school European styles too, which not many people are really doing the way we're doing it in the area. And sometimes we also are naturally carbonating by krausening, which is you have actively fermenting beer and you shoot it into a finished beer to help clean up the beer and also naturally carbonate it as well. So that's stuff that we're probably the only people in the area doing. I know we are. I would assume we are. And it does. You end up with a different beer essentially.
But even beyond that, there are how many different yeasts are there out there that we could choose from, and how many different malts and hops can you choose from? Jim, do you have a general idea of like numbers of those?
I mean, there's got to be 50 different Pilsner malts readily available to anyone in the commercial brewer in the United States. So there's always, and they're all going to be a little different. So there's really a lot of variety. It's even if it's your system too. So and the shape of your fermenter. I mean, even if we brewed the exact same recipe at another brewery down the road, it's probably going to be a little bit different because of your system. So, and we use a house yeast that we have that's pretty unique that from an old Bavarian brewery, and there's a ton of different yeast, different lager yeast, different ale yeast. So the possibilities are literally endless, which is why brewing is so fascinating. It really is.
That's cool. So one part about the process that I've been curious about is pasteurization. So is that something that you guys have to deal with in a microbrewery, or is that only for the commercial, like the nationwide commercial producers?
Yeah, that's a great question. Most craft breweries our size do not pasteurize because the alcohol itself keeps the microbes at bay essentially. You don't see pasteurization until you're at a very large regional brewery. Okay. And it does make a difference in flavor. I think you really do have a little bit more flavor in general, a little bit more hop character, a little bit more malt character by leaving it unpasteurized.
Okay, yeah. And so there's pasteurization, but now filtering is common through all breweries, right? You filter out, the sediment, or is that something else I'm thinking of when they talk about filtering?
No, you're correct. A lot of breweries filter. There a lot of breweries that are trying to make clear beers use filtration, no matter what size they are.
Okay. And so I've heard, and I don't know if this is from a beer enthusiast trying to trick me, but that before it's damaged by these processes that that Budweiser or whoever's going to do, that beer is actually full of a lot of minerals and vitamins. Is that true? Do you know? Have you heard that?
There's some minerals. Really, it depends. You get it from the malt. I don't know the ppm or anything off the top of my head, but I know our mineral content. That's actually very important. How we manipulate our water too. So that's a whole other aspect that's hugely important to brewing. We actually have a reverse osmosis system, so we add back minerals into the brewing water depending on what style of beer we're making.
Okay. Interesting stuff. So I want to kind of switch gears a little bit towards more of the business side of things. So, I mean, we're all very aware that this was a rough year for small businesses like yourselves. But what our audience might not realize is that you all had your grand opening just a few months before the pandemic was declared. So why don't you kind of give us a little background on what happened in that time? You're ramping up with the start of a new business, and then walk us through kind of the steps of what happened in your experience.
I'll take that for now. So we opened in December of 2019, 3 months before, the world ended. and missed a little bit of our honeymoon period. We were able to enter beers into the Best Florida Beers competition. And so our Vienna Lager and our Big Pluckin' Pills actually won medals at that award in March. That was kind of like the last fun beer event, beer weekend that could happen before everything shut down. We were able to switch a little bit and pivot like other people did. So we switched to to-go sales, and we're able to crowler our beer and put it in these big crowlers, 32-ounce cans, and sell that way. We also obtained a restaurant license in the summertime, and we were able to reopen. And when we did that, everything has been social distanced, and we still are able to maintain quite a distance with all of our tables. And people have truly felt comfortable coming back to BarrieHaus. So we've reopened slowly, and we have a lot of like contactless ordering in place, and our staff is extremely mindful of everyone's comfort level. So we put a lot of things into place that people feel like this is a very welcoming environment for us. It was definitely different and hard to go through as a small business, trying to just, increase our awareness of just being in the area, and start to sell our beer honestly to people coming in. And it was just it was different than our business plan intended. So we had to go back to square one for a couple different aspects of the business plan. But we're finally back on track. We are now in distribution in a couple of locations in Tampa, Fermented Reality Beer Garden over at Sparkman Wharf. We're over at Armature Works as well, near bar, and a couple of restaurants and bars around town. So our distribution side is definitely caught up to where we wanted to be. Our tap room side, we're able to host events now, and people are coming and using it as wedding venues and private events. We have our beer garden. It's outfitted and wonderful. People have loved the outside space. So I would say that we're back on track, but it was definitely an adjustment.
Okay. And so for those of us who are unaware of how a microbrewery business model works, is it, the folks showing up to the tap room, having a Saturday afternoon beer that drives the revenue, or is it, selling to nearby restaurants? Is it a mix of all of that keeps you going?
Yeah, it's definitely a mix. Our business model is we want to be a community gathering place. We would like to be the neighborhood bar in Ybor. We have the space to do so. People love bringing their dogs and love bringing their kids, and they can sit outside. They can bring their animals and sit outside, which is a unique experience in downtown Tampa. I mean, there aren't that many of those opportunities. So we are the community gathering place. And then our other lines of revenue, just to kind of bring people back to the mothership, is distribution. And we sell, beers and cans to go that people can take away or take to parties and that kind of thing.
That's cool. So, I know a lot of the breweries get to participate in these big events all over town, and that's been missing. Is that something where, you guys are generating revenue from like festivals and stuff, or you intended to, or a lot of those donated as part of like a sponsorship deal? That's something I've been curious about. And maybe you guys haven't gotten to participate in that yet. But, like Curtis Dixon Park, they have a lot of events throughout the year, and a lot of local breweries participate. What kind of arrangement is going on with those,
Oh, it's different in each one. We were able to, be a part of Tampa Bay Beer Co. puts on a big like badass beer fest in November of each year that they've had to cancel. But sometimes the distributors will purchase your beer, and sometimes you're donating it. So it just depends on the beer fest itself. We are so looking forward to being back and doing those. We've done Hogtown Brewers up in Gainesville put on an incredible event. I definitely recommend you going. It's in April of each year, so they've had to miss out a couple times, a couple years. But yeah, we love participating in going to Beer Fest. That's when you really get to know some of the people from the brewery and discover new breweries.
Very good. All right, so in a few minutes here, I'm going to open it up to questions from the audience. If anybody wants to put their question in, either about Gator football, UF, running BarrieHaus, all that. But I'm going to get my personal question in here now. So I noticed on your menu, you had something that I had never seen before, and it was referred to as like an IPL. And I guess I'm curious because I know IPAs have been quite the trendy thing. And I was wondering if are you trying to convince some IPA drinkers to move to the lagers, or are you just trying to capture them in the door? What's the story behind an IPL? And give us some background about what that is.
Well, an IPL is an IPA, but it's brewed with lager yeast. And honestly, I like them better because the end result of a lager is it's super clean and crisp. And the goal for an IPA is to let the hops shine. And there's no better way to do that than with a lager yeast. So they're fantastic. And if you're a hop head, you'll like them. You'll definitely like it.
All right, I can't wait to try it. I'm going to try it next week while we're there. And actually, this is a great moment to put in a plug. So the Tampa Gator Club is joining up with the Pinellas County Gator Club and a few other organizations. I don't have it in front of me. Hold on, let me see. Okay, the Association of Black Alumni, the Association of Hispanic Alumni, and the Association of Asian Alumni on Thursday, May 6th. We're all going to gather for our annual networking event at BarrieHaus. It's going to be Thursday at 6:30 p.m. This is a free event for all that interested. We only ask that you pre-register in advance so that we can do our pre-COVID screening questionnaire. But look forward to seeing everybody there and getting to try this IPL that you pushed. Now, at this time, I do want to give the opportunity for those that signed in live with us to go ahead and hit the raise hand button if they had a question that they wanted to jump in with. Or if you cannot speak your question, actually putting it in the chat box will be just fine. And while we wait for any questions that may come in, I wanted to kind of give you both, Jim and Britney, an opportunity if there was anything else you kind of wanted to share with us about anything we've touched on so far today.
I guess just a couple things come to mind. And really, we, like when I mentioned that us being a community gathering spot, we truly mean it. And we're looking forward to meeting the other Gators in Tampa Bay. I mean, we are connected, obviously, with a lot of different Gators in different aspects. But like, for example, over Christmas, we paired up with Jim played football with Marquis Anderson, who works for the Kids Cove Academy. Kids Cove is federally funded, and it's all the kids that go there below the poverty line. So we were able to, through the donations through the tap room, we were able to donate over $1,000 to buy some Christmas presents for all of these kids. That was one of their needs. So we would like to be a place that we can we can partner with people. We can do good in our community. We have had several Humane Society events, but we truly feel, Jim and I truly feel passionate about the kids in our area. If there's a way that we can give back and make a good start to school age children, that's something that we personally feel strongly about. So we're looking forward to the networking event, but we also are going to be a home for Gator football and other sports in the fall. So come on out to our beer garden. We might even let you set up a pop-up tent and, your lawn chairs if you want to. So I'd like to make it a fun tailgating experience this fall as well.
That sounds great. We'll have to see about letting those Seminoles show up, but yeah.
I know. Sometimes you can't keep them out really, but
Yeah. So, since I don't have a question here, I'll just go ahead and jump in with another one, and feel free at anyone if you wanted to ask a question. But, we have one. Is that Cassie?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So I've been to a couple of cool events, and I was wondering how you pick them and decide them and what kind of ones you have coming up in the future. I know we have the really cool Gator networking event next week, but I've been to at least one brunch event there. And I think recently there was a very cool succulent creating event that I missed out on. So I was kind of wondering how you guys select those events.
Oh goodness. We try to think of something fun for our mug club members. So kind of our loyalty program is we have people that have their own special mug. And so we definitely take people's considerations and what they want to see at BarrieHaus. Our Oktoberfest event every year is really fun. So we were able to socially distance and have one last year, and we can't wait to show you what we have planned there this year. But also like we'll be doing a Memorial Day barbecue where we have other brewers from the area that are going to be whipping up their competition style barbecue against BarrieHaus competition style barbecue. So we have some fun events, but truly like what people want. And we definitely are open to suggestions. So if we can plan an event for you, we're interested.
What you did mention your mug club, and I'm sure I'm not the only one interested on this. So how do you become a mug club member?
I see a couple mug club members in this.
I see it's Stephanie down there in the comments. She is a mug club member.
We actually have a limited number of mug club members, and so we put them on sale in December, and it's an annual thing. So mug club members are able to get their own, I don't have one here, but it's a really cool stone crafted mug.
I'll be right back.
Nice.
Jim's got one. It stays at the brewery, and it's 3 ounces more than what we serve in our normal steins. And so every mug club member gets their beer in this mug. So they get a little bonus every time they buy a beer. They get to drink out of Das Boot on their birthday. They get special release beers. We just had a really fun event for our mug club members where you could drink Dunkel from the taps before it was, or from the tank before it was on tap. And so we just like to do some fun stuff for them. And they're our most important people. So they're our VIPs, and we love having them. We love having a mug club.
So we will all be on the lookout for that in December then. Oh, there's the mug.
Here's the mug.
You have to fight off the other people that are current mug club members.
How do we get on the waiting list?
Talk to Kevin. He's our tap room manager. He'll be happy to help you.
Also, birthday boot.
Oh, cool. Well, thank you. I look forward to seeing your list of upcoming events. And is that posted on the website or on social media?
Thanks, Cassie. We use social media quite a bit. So we're very active on Facebook and Instagram. That's definitely the best place to find us and find the upcoming events. And then if you want to sign up for our email list, you can do that in the on our website or in the tap room. And we send out all those events that way as well, so people know what's going on.
Perfect.
Good to see you.
Good
Always
question,
wonderful.
Do we have another question? Let's see. Well, again, I'll ask away for a few more minutes here if anybody else thinks of one. But what I wanted to know now is, you're both basically trained beer judges. What's it like trying another friend's beer, and how does that go? Is it a very scientific feedback, or do you hold back feelings? Is that a sensitive topic?
It is a sensitive topic, but you got to be honest, man. You got to be honest. You got to give it to them straight. It is hard.
Has anybody done that to you and given you really good feedback that advanced your brew?
Yep. Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
Some people are more sensitive to certain off-flavor compounds than others. Britney is a particularly good taster, so I rely on her a lot in here. But yeah, you just gotta be honest about it.
That's a good point. I'm sorry to cut you off. I was just going to ask, where do you how do you sort out what personal preferences are from quality, product?
Yeah, it is difficult because you really are judging it to a certain style, and for us, for what we're particularly looking for in that style. And me, June, and Britney are the ones doing it all the time, and June's a great taster too. So we kind of rely on each other, and we're just open about it. And if it's true to style and tasting okay, sometimes it's a little bit of variation, but it's still good and not perfect, and that happens sometimes. There's a living organism making the beer after all, so we just got to make the call as a team.
A fun fact is I was pregnant during our opening. And turns out that pregnancy, as probably most of you know, changes taste buds. And you crave certain things, but also changes your taste buds, which was slightly problematic for me being a taster, and Jim relying on the consistency that we have developed for the last several years. So that was something interesting that was unexpected. And I definitely I feel like my taste buds are back to where they were before. But for me, hops were much more bitter than before. So I knew I was particularly sensitive to that. So whenever we were tasting something that I felt it was too bitter, you have to kind of mediate and realize that, okay, well, you're particularly sensitive to that right now. So, it's tasting differently to Jim. So you have to kind of take your word for it at some point. It's just a really interesting experience.
That is a fun fact. That's interesting. I didn't realize that would happen there. That's interesting. Yeah. So, I think we've about hit our time. So if there are no other questions or no other comments from our guests, I would like to thank both of you, Dr. B and Jim, for joining us today on this Swampside Chat. For those of you that are not familiar, the Tampa Gator Club is doing these the fourth Tuesday of every month. It's going to remain a virtual event so that we can connect to those that are unable to meet in person. From our website, social media, you can follow when the next one is going to be. Just keep in contact there. And then again, just to remind everybody, we are doing our largest annual networking event on May 6th. So please, please, please register. It's going to be a great time. I look forward to getting to know these beers a little bit more that we've talked about today. But with that, I thank you all who had joined us today during lunch. And for those that watched the recording, thanks for tuning in. And with that, if anybody has anything else, if not, see you next time.
Thank you so much for having us. You can contact us anytime. My email is Britney at BarrieHaus, BRITTNEY at BarrieHaus.com. Jim's is Jim at BarrieHaus. So please contact us and let us know how we can be more involved in the Gator Network. We're extremely happy to be on this. And thank you, Chris and Allison, for setting this up.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, everyone.